My name is Dawn Moser, and I was 34 years old when my father sent the message that finally stripped away every illusion I still had about my family. I remember where I was when I read it. Sitting in my uncle's kitchen, mug of coffee cooling in my hands, morning light slanting across the table like it always did. It should have been a normal moment. Instead, it became the point of no return. The message was short, too short for something so final. You're not welcome at the wedding, and don't bring that kid around anymore. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, like my brain was refusing to accept that he had actually typed those words and pressed send. That kid, my daughter, his only grandchild. I didn't cry, not right then. I didn't call him, didn't demand an explanation, didn't type out the dozen responses forming in my head. I didn't even shake. I replied with one word. Noted. Then I locked my phone, set it face down on the table, and leaned back in my chair, letting that strange, quiet heat settle into my chest. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that sharpens. I had been living with my uncle for 2 months by that point, ever since I sold my apartment. Not because I had to, because I chose to. For the first time in my life, I was thinking past survival. I wanted a home, not just a roof, but a place that felt like ours. Somewhere my daughter could leave her toys out without being scolded. Somewhere I wouldn't feel like I was constantly apologizing for existing. My parents never offered to help. They didn't suggest we stay with them. They didn't ask what my plans were. My mother said, flatly, that she wasn't comfortable having that child in the house. Said it would disrupt the peace. Like my daughter was a storm cloud, not a little girl who loved drawing animals and humming to herself when she thought no one was listening. For years, I made excuses for them. Told myself they didn't mean it the way it sounded, that they were old-fashioned, that they just needed time. But something about that text felt different. Final. Like they'd been waiting for the right excuse to cut me loose. My younger sister, Lydia, had gotten engaged the previous spring. A man she met at work, stable, polite, approved of in every way that mattered to my parents. They adored him instantly, talked about him like he was already family, like he had passed some invisible test I'd failed years ago. Suddenly, everything revolved around the wedding. My parents were glowing. Finally, one daughter doing things the right way, the right order, the right partner, the right optics. And without anyone ever actually asking, it became understood that I would help pay for it. I had money, didn't I? They didn't ask if I wanted to. They didn't discuss numbers. They simply assumed. At first, I agreed, because I still believed helping would earn me some kind of grace. I told them I could contribute $10,000. No more. I was clear about that from the start. They smiled, thanked me, acted grateful. For about 5 minutes. Then the expenses started rolling in. Dress fittings, cake tastings, floral deposits, venue payments that appeared fully formed, already decided, already booked. I wasn't consulted, but somehow I was still expected to cover it. Then they added me to a joint wedding account. For transparency, my mother said. What she didn't mention was that they had already started pulling money from it. I checked the balance one evening and felt my stomach drop. Thousands gone. I scrolled through the transaction list slowly, my thumb cold against the screen. A car dealership, a large withdrawal, another charge, another. They had bought Lydia and her fiancé a brand new car, with my money. A car I hadn't agreed to, a purchase no one had even mentioned. I called my mother immediately. She didn't apologize. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. She said I was being selfish. Said I could always make more money, but Lydia only had one chance to live out her dream. Said I should be happy to help my sister start her life the right way. That night, I sat alone in my uncle's guest room, phone glowing in the dark, staring at that account, staring at the assumption behind it, the certainty that I would stay quiet, that I wouldn't push back, that I'd swallow it like I always had. I thought about my daughter, about the way my parents spoke about her when they thought I wasn't listening, about the text my father had sent, so casual in its cruelty. And I realized something. They didn't see my money as help. They saw it as theirs. So I did one thing. I moved every cent out of that account and back into my personal one. It was still legally mine. They had just assumed I'd never dare to take it back. 3 days later, my uncle walked into the kitchen with a look I didn't recognize. He asked me, carefully, if I had done something to the wedding account. I nodded. That was all. He exhaled slowly and told me Lydia had been dress shopping when she opened the app, that she had screamed so loudly the entire boutique froze, that the venue deposit had bounced, that the wedding planner refused to return calls. The panic had begun. and I hadn't lifted a finger to stop it. After that, the silence lasted 2 days. Then everything detonated at once. The silence after I pulled the money didn't last long enough for anyone to calm down. It just sat there, heavy and deceptive, like the pause before something breaks. 2 days. That was it. On the third morning, my uncle came back from a walk with his phone still in his hand, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, like he'd just listened to something he didn't want to repeat. "They're spiraling," he said finally. I didn't ask who they were. I already knew. He told me Lydia had opened the banking app while standing on one of those little velvet pedestals in a bridal boutique downtown. She was half-dressed, pins in the fabric, mirrors everywhere. She'd been talking about how the gown made her look royal, how it was the one, how everything was finally perfect. Then the app refreshed. The balance showed 0. According to the woman doing the fitting, Lydia didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She went completely still, like her brain short-circuited, then let out a sound so loud people in the front of the store thought someone had been hurt. The venue called next. They hadn't received the final payment. Their policy was strict. No payment meant no date. No date meant the reservation was canceled. The next available Saturday wasn't until the following year. Lydia dropped the phone. Then she screamed. Not a quiet sob, not a graceful breakdown, a full raw scream that echoed off the mirrors and sent the boutique into chaos. The dress slid off the pedestal and hit the floor. She stormed out barefoot, still wearing the underlayers and veil, yelling that someone had stolen her wedding and ruined her life. My mother chased after her, trying to hush her, telling people it was a misunderstanding. Lydia screamed louder, right there on the sidewalk, accusing me by name. People stared. Someone recorded it. By the time they got home, the story had already begun to change. According to my mother, I had planned the whole thing. According to Lydia, I was jealous because I'd never had a real wedding. According to my father, it was all a tragic misunderstanding that needed to be fixed immediately. He left me a voicemail that evening. His voice was gentle, careful, like he was talking to a stranger whose cooperation he needed. He didn't mention the text he'd sent me, didn't acknowledge telling me I wasn't welcome, didn't say a word about my daughter. He said things had gotten out of hand, that everyone was stressed, that Lydia was devastated, that maybe I could help straighten things out. Like I was a customer service department, like I hadn't been deliberately cut out days earlier. I didn't respond. That night, I took my daughter out for tacos. It was cold, and we sat on a bench near the lake with our gloves on, breath puffing into the air. She talked nonstop about a painting she was working on. Bright colors, a house with a big tree. A fence, she said, was just for us. I remember thinking how quiet it felt, how peaceful, like I had stepped out of a room full of shouting and closed the door behind me. Meanwhile, my parents were calling everyone they knew. At first, they told people it was a banking error, said the funds were temporarily frozen. When someone asked why the venue had dropped them, they pivoted again, claiming they had decided on something more intimate. But stories don't stay neat when too many people are listening. My uncle was the one who kept me updated, not because I asked, but because he couldn't believe what he was hearing. 2 days later, he told me the truth they were trying to hide. They had already spent most of the money. Not just deposits, not just small expenses. The car. They thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late. Thought guilt would keep me quiet once everything was already paid for. Thought I would fall back into line because that's what I'd always done. That's when it clicked. They didn't need my help. They needed my silence. They needed me to be the one person who never asked questions, never set boundaries, never made anything uncomfortable. The one who absorbed the inconvenience so everyone else could feel good. For years, I played that role. Not anymore. By the end of the week, the wedding was 4 weeks away and officially unraveling. The dress hadn't been paid for. The boutique canceled the order and sold it to another bride the same day. Lydia screamed at the receptionist and threw her heels across the parking lot until my mother arrived with a smoothie and a pill. The venue was gone. The DJ hadn't been paid. The cake designer blocked them. The wedding planner stopped responding and posted a vague story about learning to vet clients better, then set her account to private. It was an avalanche, and I didn't have to push a single thing. My parents' panic escalated into something almost theatrical. My mother started floating a new narrative online, talking about scaling back, focusing on a spiritual celebration, posting photos of candles with captions about intimacy and intention. No one believed it. People started asking questions, quiet ones at first, then louder ones. Why had the venue changed? Why wasn't I involved anymore? Why was there suddenly a brand new car when the wedding budget had vanished? Someone even commented online, "I hope they didn't use the sisters' money for that car." The comments stayed up. No one defended them. My uncle finally snapped. In the family group chat, he wrote one sentence that detonated everything. "So your granddaughter isn't good enough to be in the same room as you now?" My mother left the chat immediately. My father stayed silent. A few relatives reached out to me privately. Some apologized. One cousin canceled her flight. And through all of it, I said nothing. Because for the first time, I understood something with absolute clarity. This was never just about a wedding. It was about control. And the moment I said no, just once, the whole structure collapsed. By the second week, the panic had turned feral. I wasn't watching it firsthand, but I still knew everything that was happening. Not because I asked, but because people couldn't stop talking. Screenshots, forwarded voicemails, quiet updates whispered through extended family like contraband. The wedding was 3 weeks away. Invitations had already been sent months earlier. Save the dates were still pinned to refrigerators. People had booked flights, hotels, taken time off work. Publicly, my parents pretended everything was fine. Privately, they were unraveling. Lydia's social media still showed the highlight titled, "She Said Yes," champagne glasses clinking, beach photos, her fiancé lifting her in that staged, awkward way couples do when they're trying to look spontaneous. Anyone scrolling would think the wedding was sailing smoothly toward perfection. Behind the scenes, it was collapsing by the hour. The dress was officially gone. The boutique didn't budge. Miss a final payment. Lose the gown. Another bride had walked out with it that same afternoon, one who actually paid on time. Lydia did not take that well. According to my uncle, she showed up at the store screaming, demanded to see the manager, accused them of discrimination, then sobbed in the parking lot until my mother arrived with a Xanax and a smoothie like this was some kind of emergency kit they'd perfected over the years. Next came the venue. My parents tried to argue their way into a grace period. My father even floated the idea that I had hacked the account, said it with a straight face. Like that made more sense than admitting they'd overstepped. It didn't matter. The estate was rebooked within 48 hours. Someone else was now getting married on that date. Someone else's dream. The DJ was never paid. The cake designer blocked them. The florist stopped responding. The wedding planner, who had once sent smiley face emails and exclamation points, went completely silent. It was an avalanche, and I was standing well out of its path. My mother went into full damage control mode. She started telling people they had chosen to scale things down, that they wanted something smaller, more intimate, more spiritual. She posted a photo of a candle with a caption about new beginnings. No one believed her. At one point, a cousin sent me a voice memo from a group call. You could hear my mother crying in the background, saying she didn't understand why certain family members were turning against them. She never said my name, but she didn't have to. I didn't respond. Not to the voicemails, not to the texts, not even when my father sent a single message that read, "We need to talk." We didn't, because this was never just about a wedding. It was about years of quiet insults, backhanded compliments, conditional support that only existed as long as I stayed agreeable, as long as I didn't make anyone uncomfortable, as long as I didn't demand respect. I said no once, and the entire system collapsed. They tried again. Lydia emailed me late one night. The subject line read, "From one woman to another." I almost laughed. The email was long and rambling. She talked about rebuilding our bond, said things had gone off track, reminded me that family is forever. Family is forever, unless that family includes a child they see as defective because of who her father is. A child they never truly wanted. A child they treated like a problem instead of a person. At the end of the email was a list. Venue, rentals, officiant, hair and makeup. Total just over $19,000. She said if I could help with this one last thing, she'd never ask again. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my uncle. 10 minutes later, he called me laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Even he was done with their delusions. Apparently, my mother had shown up at his house uninvited, trying to guilt him into stepping in. She said canceling the wedding would stain the family's reputation. He told her the only stain was how they treated me and my daughter. After that, she stopped coming around. 2 weeks before the wedding, the fantasy finally died. No estate, no floral arch, no custom napkins with initials and dates. They started calling it a cozy gathering of close family. The guest list dropped from 120 to 30. The cake came from a grocery store. They booked a local banquet hall with wood paneling and flickering lights. People noticed. People talked. Still, no one apologized. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted obedience. They wanted me to come back, to prove I still needed them. I didn't. And they were finally starting to understand that. A week before the wedding, the final invitations went out. Cheap, last-minute printouts from a free template. No lace, no gold trim, not even a return address. Just a vague note about a private family event at a venue no one recognized. My uncle got one. My cousin Amber got one. Even my father's old boss from a job he'd left 7 years earlier got one. But not me. Not my daughter. That wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. A clear message. You don't belong. And surprisingly, it didn't hurt. It clarified everything. This was no longer about a wedding. It was about control. They needed someone to blame for everything falling apart. And by refusing to play along, I had made myself the villain in their story. What they didn't expect was how bad that story would look once the truth started leaking out. The questions started quietly. Why wasn't I invited? Why had the venue changed so suddenly? Why was there a brand new car sitting in my parents' driveway when the wedding budget had supposedly shifted? At first, my parents ignored them. Then they deflected. Then they grew defensive. A comment appeared online beneath one of Lydia's carefully filtered photos. I hope they didn't use the sisters' money for that car. It stayed up. No one rushed to deny it. That was when the story began slipping out of their control. My uncle finally lost patience. In the family group chat, after weeks of polite silence, he typed a single message that cut straight through the fog. So, your granddaughter isn't good enough to be in the same room as you now? My mother left the chat immediately. My father didn't respond at all. That silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. A few relatives reached out to me privately after that. Quiet apologies. Careful words. One aunt admitted she'd canceled her flight. Another cousin said she'd always wondered why my parents spoke about my daughter, like she was an inconvenience instead of a child. Then came the surprise I didn't see coming. 2 days later, Lydia's fiancé's parents asked to meet me. They showed up looking uncomfortable, like people who had just realized they'd been standing on the wrong side of something and didn't know how to step away without falling. They told me they had been lied to, that I had been painted as bitter, unstable, jealous, that my daughter had been described as baggage. They'd only just learned that I had paid for most of the wedding, and that the money was never meant to include a car. They handed me a cashier's check for $5,000. They said it wasn't to erase anything, just to acknowledge it. I asked one question. Does your son still want to marry her? They exchanged a look. They weren't sure. The wedding went ahead that Saturday. It looked less like a celebration and more like a conference event that ran out of funding halfway through planning. Folding chairs, generic linens, decorations that looked reused. The music was a phone playlist that kept cutting out whenever someone walked too far from the speaker. No one danced. During one of the speeches, Lydia laughed and joked about me stealing money and raising a charity case. The room went silent. Her husband, no, the man she had just married, didn't laugh. He stood up quietly, set his drink down, and walked out. He didn't come back. People started leaving soon after. One woman muttered, "This was a mistake," as she passed the exit. The cupcakes went untouched. Conversations died mid-sentence. By the end of the night, the room was half empty. The next morning, photos appeared and disappeared. One showed Lydia sitting alone at the head table. Her smile looked stiff, practiced, temporary. By Monday, her husband had packed a bag and left town. He said he needed time. 2 days later, Lydia posted a vague quote about heartbreak. No apology, no accountability. But the truth had already done its work. What she said about my daughter was unforgivable. Even the people who once defended her backed away quietly. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken for me. 3.5 weeks after the wedding, I closed on my house. Mine. No co-signers, no conditions, no strings attached. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't need to be. It had 3 bedrooms, sunlight that spilled across the kitchen floor in the mornings, and a fenced yard with a wide maple tree that dropped leaves like confetti in the fall. The day we got the keys, my daughter ran from room to room, her voice echoing down the hallway. "We're home," she yelled, breathless and laughing. And for the first time in years, I believed it. My parents found out, of course. They always did. News traveled fast when it involved me doing something without their approval. There were no congratulations, just bitterness. Thinly veiled comments about timing, about priorities, about how everything had gotten so complicated lately. Lydia stayed silent. Her husband never came back. The car they bought with my money sat unused in my parents' driveway, a gleaming reminder of a fantasy that collapsed under its own weight. I focused on building a life instead. I painted walls. I planted herbs in the backyard. I let my daughter choose which room was hers and which shade of blue she wanted on the walls. I hosted a small housewarming with people who had shown up for me when it mattered. No one mentioned the wedding. That chapter was closed. One evening, my uncle stood in the kitchen, looking around with a soft smile. "You built this from nothing," he said. And he was right. I remembered every moment I had been made to feel small, every time my daughter was treated like a burden, every time love had come with conditions. Now we were free, fully out of reach. My parents saw the photos eventually, the lights strung across the yard, the laughter. The caption beneath one picture read simply, "Home." They didn't like it. And for the first time, that didn't matter.